This sketchbook is the fastest I've ever filled and I'm incredibly proud of it, so I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you today. It's filled with memories from my time in France, so I hosted an art retreat last month in June and did a few pages beforehand, then did some there whilst I was teaching and then filled the rest of the pages when I was back. So this has been about a month and a half in the making in terms of filling this entire sketchbook, which, like I said, is the fastest I've ever filled a sketchbook before. Usually it takes me a long time to get through them. That's because I usually work in multiple sketchbooks depending on the mediums that I want to use, and I just felt so inspired, so I'm really looking forward to doing a sketchbook tour of this today. So hello if you're new here, my name is Katie, I'm a full-time sketchbook artist and I use a lot of mixed media in my work. There is a lot of mixed media in here, and this is the Hahnemuehle watercolor book, so I do have the little info sheet that it comes with. So this is by Hahnemuehle. It is their watercolor book, but it's not the one with 100% cotton. This is just their standard. It is cold pressed, 200 GSM, it's A5 in size and has 60 pages. I've done some tours on my channel before of this sketchbook because this is the second one that I filled and I really enjoyed using it. It's really good for watercolor and wet media, so when I use my gouache. It is cold pressed, so I struggle a little bit with some of my pencil details, but it's a really good all-rounder and definitely one that I find easy to fill. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. So this was created and filled during and for my art retreat with Uptrek, which I did back in June in the beautiful Occitanie region in France. So the south of France, it was amazing. I had 15 artists with me that I was teaching and we were creating every day in our art studio and in lots of the wonderful towns around the south of France. I am just going to be a bit of a marketer here, so I hope you don't mind, but I have launched my next retreat for 2027, which you can find all the info about in this video here or in the Uptrek link down below in the description. We're going to be heading to the Loire Valley in June 2027, and I would love to meet some of you there. I'm really, really excited, and hopefully this video and this sketchbook gives you a bit of an insight into the kind of art that we create and what we get up to. Whenever I do art retreats, I like to do a goodie bag, and I created a zine for this one. So this has got lots of different things and inspiration about colours and tips and tricks and that sort of thing. But I obviously needed some artwork to fill this for some of the pages. So that's what I did in this sketchbook. You can see I definitely upped the saturation a little bit. It's a bit more pale here, and I will try and colour correct this because it's looking quite pale on camera. But that was a nice way to start the sketchbook. I went over the spine here, and this was painted with watercolours, and there's some Neocolor on here as well, so you might see this tin. I got asked a bit about this in last week's video of what this tin is, so I'll leave a link to it down below, but I did buy it in bulk for my retreat participants, so I don't know if you can get them individually because I did buy it in a box of 20, but it fits 9 Neocolors really, really well. It's the perfect length, and then I've just got a bit of foam here that I've cut in just to keep them nice and safe and underneath as well. But I curated this palette especially for the retreat, so I want to say a big thank you to Karen Dash and Jacquard International as well for helping me curate this because they are very south of France colours, I think, so I used that a little bit here. And then, like I said, this is for the zine. So I curated the colour palette and the materials list to send to the participants beforehand, so lots of colour swatching here, and I really enjoy swatching. I do think it's really helpful. And then some colour mixing. So this was still for the zine. We did do more colour mixing whilst we were there as well. That was definitely important. Colour theory is really, really helpful to know. Then we've got this one, so another 2 panels. This was not done there, so this was using photos that Uptrek had sent me, and same here as well for our beautiful retreat home for the week, which was in Taysaude, called Domaine Don Nordette. Now I will add in something here, so there might be a couple of spaces within these pages where I just need to go back and fill them in. I'll write a little bit here about my thoughts about the retreat and how I was feeling beforehand, because the first page that I did when we were ready and on our trip ready to go was at the airport. I have tried to draw planes before. This is probably one of the most successful ones. I still wouldn't say it was brilliant, but I really was determined to draw a lot on this trip, and so I was really happy to have started off the trip well. So this was just at our gate before we were boarding to take our flight to Toulouse. So this was brush pens. Obviously my gouache was in my hold luggage, so this was just using my carry-on stuff, so Ecoline brush pen and then some coloured pencils as well. These men I don't often draw people in my work, but I do think that they add to the scale, and I like the pop of colourful cones there as well. And there was washi tape that I included in our goodie bags as well, so I had one of those, which was really helpful for sticking in tickets and things. I also included a glue stick, so I really wanted this to be a combination of art, collage and ephemera from our trip. Okay, so this left-hand page was drawn in Toulouse. So Mitch and I had a day in Toulouse before we then moved on to our retreat location the following day. So it was really, really warm when we went. So we went and sat in Jardin Royal. And I did this, just sat on a bench there with coloured pencils, Tombow brush pens and my Neocolors as well. So really nice, just very, very chilled. We loved Toulouse. I've absolutely loved seeing everybody's work from the Urban Sketches Symposium that was recently in Toulouse, so it's really nice to see it now that I've been there too. And again, we've got another figure here, so like I said, I don't do that often, but it was a really lovely view, and I think he added a lot of context there as well. You can see I have added on quite a bit of writing, so I did want this to be a mix of diary and sketchbook. So here, this is when I was waiting for the guests to arrive. So Mitch and I went in the morning, set up the studio and got all settled in, and then we were waiting for the guests. So I did some art whilst I was waiting, just on our little patio. Now you might be able to see here that it did start to rain, so you can see lots of little dots because it started raining and I closed my sketchbook. And so the colour from this page transferred because of the water on my sketchbook, which I was a little bit disheartened about at first, but it does add to the memory, so I'm not mad about it now. And I just added on some writing here. I mentioned about the rain. It was really nice. I just used some gouache here just to start this trip off, and I finished it in the evening when we were just sort of waiting before dinner. Okay, so our first day was obviously very full of introductions and play and colour mixing. Like I said, colour theory is important, so I've added little bits of context and notes just for me so I can look back on in the future, because I do find it really, really fun to look back through my work. And it's why I love sketchbooks, and I'm always encouraging everyone to keep one and not rip anything out, because it really shows our journey. So yeah, lots of colour mixing using the colours I suggested in our materials list. So this doesn't have any context to it, as I was teaching as we were demoing. And then we went to cast. Now, this was very, very fun and unexpected, so there wasn't a huge amount of drawing because we were visiting a lot of brocants, but this was done in a parking lot, so we were underground because it was shaded, so it was quite bright and sunny that day. Luckily, it wasn't super hot and we didn't go during a heat wave, but it was still pretty bright, so we found some shade in a parking garage, and I did a demo for the group. So this was about 20 minutes before we then had to get our bus home. And I used brush pens again. I really love using brush pens for really fast and quick work, and then coloured pencils on top. So you can see where some of the texture of the cold press paper does show through, but it's not super textured, so it's still doable, and I do like the freshness of this. I think ideally if I had a bit more time to think about the composition, I might have moved it up and got a little bit of the river along here. But this was the view that I wanted to focus on in terms of the colours of the building. Sometimes it's called Little Venice if you are in cast because of these colourful buildings along the river. So I really wanted to capture that. And I thought that was a really fun demo and a nice thing to do in the afternoon of our first full day. So in the evening, there's a bit of downtime before dinner, so I painted this one using a page from the book that I bought at a brocante, which was falling apart. If you've seen my video where I shared a vlog and I show you some of the bits I picked up in France, then you'll see that book, it really was in pieces, so I didn't feel bad about taking this page out and painting on top. So this is with gouache, coloured pencils and Neocolor again, so I tried to stick with the same mediums. And then I finished it off when we got home. So not every page in this book was created whilst there. Some of it was and some of it wasn't. So I filled this in when we got home. This was a coffee from a little cafe we popped into, and this was the view walking over to one of the brocantes, which I did in watercolour. So whilst I was there, I was using gouache and brush pens, Neocolors and pencils, and when I got home I decided to just use what I had. So I did use watercolour here, just to try and get some of that softness of the reflection there. This was actually drawn on the bus when we went to Chateau Lastore for a wine tasting. So I did draw these on the bus again because I was, on the move. I did use brush pens. I didn't obviously want to get my paints out whilst we were moving. So just brush pens here with quick flashes out of the window. So these weren't drawn from photos. They were just drawn based on what I could see, making things up a little bit, but it worked out well. So these 3 were filled on the way there, and then sadly it did rain, so on the way back, I tried to capture that here. So these 2 were on the way back, and I just really wanted to show just how much it was raining and the difference. And I really like this spread. I think it's fun, and I haven't drawn on a bus before, so I really enjoyed that. So this page was filled whilst we were doing our wine tasting. So we did a tour of the property, which was really interesting. And then we did some wine tasting. So I drew these on the table. It was really, obviously we're all artists, so I felt very, very comfortable getting my art supplies out. I don't tend to draw in a public setting. So it was so nice to just feel like I could do that. So just drew these whilst we were tasting them as well. Just using 3 brush pens, so the pink, the blue and the grey, and then a dark indigo pencil for the line work. I did also add this in whilst I was there with a black ink pen, and then I added on the journaling after. So this was the pigeon house, so I think one of the oldest in the region, which was there. So I filled this in again when we got home, but this one I did whilst there. This was just using the brown paper from the brown paper bag, which you can see here, that I picked up whilst there, and I just did this on top when we got back using Neocolors. So this is just Neocolors and a touch of terracotta pencil on top of the brown paper bag, and then this was filled in at home with watercolors. I really like the playfulness. I really like trying to add little doodles and change the orientation of my text. I just think it adds a lot of energy. So what I actually did whilst there was I drew this, and then I ran out of space for drawing more wines that we were tasting. So I turned the page and did these up here. I didn't realise that I actually skipped this out, so that's why that's there. It feels a little bit odd, but I've just added in some collage here with, again, the brown paper bag and the business card, and I might add something here, just some text or some swatches. This was painted from a photo when I got home, so this was a very sweet little cat, which hopefully you can spot down there amongst all of these bushes. Again, really quick one with just some brown ink using my Sailor Fude de Manon and then watercolour, just to try and capture just one of the many, many photos I took whilst on this trip. Okay, so this should say a lesson in value. We did a lesson in value the next day, so again, this won't make much sense without the context of the lesson, but playing with limited colour palettes and the different values that we can create within them and how that affects our paintings and drawings. So a really helpful lesson, and definitely something I want to do more of. And then I did do some traditional gouache studies because I did have a request for painting on top of a coloured base. So I always try and make sure the lessons can be flexible so I can take requests and things like that. So before I taught that lesson, I did want to just test it out because usually I use acrylic gouache for my base, but I wanted to make sure I could do it on traditional gouache. So I did that here and it worked out great. So I filled this one whilst there, and then I did this later on in the trip when we were just all hanging in the studio. So bit of a practice one here. Ready for this one. So this was done as a demo for the group the following day. Like I said, it is with a traditional gouache base, so it did change my teaching and obviously how we were working with the paint compared to working on an acrylic gouache base. But it worked out really well, and I do love the energy of this one. I love the vibrancy. I really like the colours too. So this was painted there with this incredible view in front of us. I will put some pictures on the screen so you can see. But like I said, if you did want to see a little bit more in depth of what we were doing and a play-by-play sort of rundown of the trip, then that is in my art retreat video recap, which I will link up here in the cards. So yeah, very, very vibrant, some pops of the turquoise and the sky blue coming through here. Just really like the energy of this one, and I love teaching it to the group. And then the following day we went to Gaillac, so lots of markets there in the south of France, and it was definitely something that we wanted to draw. There's loads of fascinating architecture, and obviously the market stalls is a really important part. So we did another demo when I sat on the floor and everyone was watching, and did these two. So this was about line versus shape and which we did first. So I think this one was line first, and this one was shape first. I'm trying to remember the order, but it was basically simplification. Obviously, these towns and these scenes are very, very busy, so I was working and talking through my process with the group for how I would simplify this scene. So very simple, just two colours here with the beige Tombow, which is the 990. And then I also used what was this one, which is the terracotta Luminance pencil. So yeah, very, very simple here, but I think it's a really useful lesson. Okay, some more colour here. So this was on our trip to Albi. So I did also have a request for painting water. There was lots of rivers around, so that's what this is here, just a suggestion of the water. We had this incredible view when we were just coming and walking into Albi. I'll put a picture on screen, but it was stunning. So we had to really simplify because we were trying to fit in the most that we could and also do some drawing and not get overwhelmed. So this is with brush pens and touch of coloured pencil. And then that was done as a demo, and then the students did their own version. So I did this little drawing down here. And then we had the rest of the day, we had a lovely lunch. We also went to the Toulouse-Lautrec Museum, and this was inside that. So this is Palais de la Bourbie. So I did actually draw that beforehand here. This is also from inside that lovely little garden. And this was drawn alongside Emily and Flossie and just looking down, and we just felt so inspired to draw that view. So this is Neocolor's brush pens, and I also used the black ink pen to draw on top. It was just a standard ink pen, so it wasn't waterproof, so I had to do that after. But I really like this. I think it looks really pretty, and I also like how the text sort of fills in the space around it. Okay, this one was done that evening, again, with the downtime that we had in the studio. This is just one pen, so I feel like I've really been a little bit more limited in terms of the stuff that I used, but I'm really pleased with this one. So this is Rue Marie, so this was from a photo I took earlier that day in beautiful Albi of their town sort of square. There was a market set up. This was lots of umbrellas and tables with the restaurant from over here. And this is just one Tombow, so this is the 553 Tombow, and then I've layered it on top to get the different values, so where it's a little bit darker, it's just another layer of that Tombow. But I really like the simplicity here. I'm not one for just using one material, so I was surprised and pleased with myself that I managed to do this and capture all of the different details, but still keep it, I think, quite simple. Okay, so this was another demo and lesson the following day as we used a lot of our photos from the markets in Gaillac to create this composition and how to take like a busy scene and add on other elements. So this is with gouache, so there was a lot of teaching about how I use gouache and mix on my palette, how much I squeeze out, that I think was really helpful to see. And then simplification of learning what we include and what we don't include and how we can simplify it in our painting. So this was the larger scene, and then I zoomed in on some of the produce on the tables here with the beetroot and the onions. So this was drawn with an audience, but I really like this one, and yeah, it's pretty simple really, but a fun one to paint. Okay, so over here I did two tests as well because I was asked about the colour palettes. So just a test here with using a Tombow for the base of the building versus a Desert Rose Neocolor for the base here and just playing there. And then this one was a demo again about perspective. So I did a very, very quick lesson on perspective. I did take another sketchbook, my Royal Talons, but I did 2 pages of this one and this one in here because I wanted to sort of cross-reference this so you can see this is the one here that I then painted in. I just decided to mostly focus in this sketchbook, but this one was here if I needed it. So yeah, quick lesson on perspective there using gouache. I really like this. I think it's simple, but it was helpful to show the 2-point perspective. And then this one I did when we were back at home. This is one of the views that Mitch took whilst he was exploring some of the countryside around us. And this is painted with watercolour and finished off with a touch of Neocolor. So there's no pencil on here, I don't think. So pretty simple, this one. But I do like how it sits with the buildings. Okay, so this one, again, I painted whilst there. I remember eating some crepes, so we were given loads of snacks and things in the studio. So I remember painting this and helping students out. They were coming up and asking questions and things. And this was from one of the views when we went on a walk after dinner. So I was trying to capture that sunset vibe, and I've left this here because I do want to do like a personal text here where I write a little bit more about my thoughts and feelings from the retreat and just how special it was with the connecting with these wonderful artists. But that's going to be quite private, so I'm going to write that there. But it is going to be hidden underneath here. I picked this up at one of the brocants, and I think it works really nicely. It's French, so it does remind me of the trip. I really like the colours, and it serves as a nice little sort of hiding spot for some private journaling. This was done with gouache and some Neocolors on top. And then we got home. So I was over halfway of filling this sketchbook whilst there, which I was absolutely chuffed with. I was so pleased that I managed to fill all of these pages during a week where I was teaching, because usually I don't get that much done. I'm very focused on going around to everybody, but because we had a bit of downtime in the evening, I was really pleased with what I managed to fill. I decided to continue this sketchbook knowing, there weren't that many pages left, and knew I wanted to do a tour, because I think if I only had a few pages, then you wouldn't see this video. I might have spent ages working on this in the future, coming back in. But I was really determined, and I felt really, really inspired from our time in France. Just from that week, I had a camera roll filled with images that I really wanted to share. It was also market stalls and shopfronts theme on my Patreon. So when I got back, I did host our 2 live drawing sessions. So this was one of them. This was focusing on shopfronts that I saw in Toulouse, and this one was in Gaillac. So drawing here with my patrons, 10 minutes and 20 minutes here. I did also do some others in another sketchbook. This one, because I took so many photos and the markets were such an important part of our trip, I also did this one, which is very out of my comfort zone, but I really like the energy here. I used watercolor, so you can see a lot of the movement in the sky. I like the dark tone here. It's still very simplified versus, the amount of people that were there, but I did want to include the people because it was a very bustling market. It would have felt weird not to include them, and just simplifying it a little bit more. And I am pleased with this one. Even though it was quite a challenge for me, I do think it turned out nicely. Okay, so after we did shop fronts for the YouTube live stream, we did market stalls for the Zoom call. And this was the second spread that I did, because I did do one in my Strathmore, which is obviously a different sketchbook, but I did want to show you. I did this one from the live stream, which is from Toulouse, and then this one, which is a photo from Gaillac, one of the beautiful food stalls. Everything was so vibrant and fresh. I'm very, very jealous of their food markets in France. But this was the 2 final ones that we did, so the sort of warm downs. And then I just felt so inspired and I kept going. So that felt so nice to just want to keep on painting. So I painted this again using the reference from my trip to France and just filling this page with colour. I think this might be my favourite spread from this sketchbook. But yeah, very fun to do. And again, it's linked with my memories. I've added in some text here, lots of colourful swatches and just playing around with textures. Then we have this one, which feels a little bit unfinished because it is. I didn't add on like the dark greens that I'd planned to here, and I was also going to add on some white for the daisies. Originally I'd planned on sticking in like the tickets and maybe like one of these postcards, because this is where the Toulouse-Lautrec Museum is in Albi. But I actually like how this looks. I didn't really want to cover it up, so I've decided not to add those in and just keep it as it is. I haven't gone back in and finished it off because I feel like it doesn't need it. And this was, like I said, Palais de la Brebis, where the garden is this. But obviously I didn't do this there. I did paint this when I was at home using gouache. And I'm just going to leave it there. Perhaps I will label it at the top. I painted this one as well. So this is Flossie Under the Trees. This was on, I think, our second to last day, where we were all sort of spread out and I was going around to see everybody, and I just love this little view of Flossie sat on the bench in the shade. This is an acrylic gouache base. You can kind of see it peeking through around the corners, but it's a coral pink, sort of salmony coral pink behind, and then I went on top with traditional gouache. So I really like this. It did take a while for me to paint, but I think it was worth it. I think the values are really nice and I love the texture in the tree. And then this one, I did want to draw some of the plants. So this was the bear's breeches that we saw quite a lot when we were out and about, and also at the domain. And then this one was just a really pretty thistle, and I thought they sat together really nicely in terms of their colour palettes. And as a spread, I feel like it's quite cohesive, despite not planning for it to be, because we've got Flossie's purple jumper there and then the purple from the flowers. So I love it when that happens. Even though they're completely different subjects, it still ties together because of the colours. Okay, so this one I painted recently for my Patreon, so we are in gouache month, so I wanted to use gouache on toned paper because it's perfect for that because of its opacity. So this was a chatty walkthrough painting sort of video that I shared for my patrons. If you want to see the process of this one, then that's on the Sketch Club tier. And then this one, which I definitely didn't capture the vibes of the photo very well, but I did just want to play around with texture. This does have a very light yellow base, and then it's Neocolors and Neo Arts on top, so playing around with some textures here, trying to be a little bit more expressive and simplified with my mark making. I don't love this, and I don't think it really sits well with this one, but it's quite fun. I do love the sky, so that's something I do like about that one. And then just talking about the art studio, which is what this building is here, from Domaine Don Nodette. This one I'm pleased with. This was done with acrylic markers. Again, this was taken by Mitch whilst he was on a run. And one thing that we kept seeing around the place where we were and among all the fields were swallows. So lots and lots of birds, lots of wildlife. It was really lovely to see. And I didn't know if adding these on were a little bit twee, but it's part of the memory and they were definitely there. So I am glad I added them on. I kept this quite fast and simple because I did want to try and keep that energy. So really big sky. Usually I don't go so big with the sky, but I'm glad I did here. It just kind of captures the expanse of the countryside that we felt there. It just felt so peaceful and chill, and I feel like this represents that nicely. Down here we've got more acrylic markers, some Neocolors on top, and a little bit of pencil as well. So I really like this one. It feels very much like the location we were in. So a little bit different here compared to this one, so you can see how my style really varies. And I'm not worried about that because it's still made by me, it's still my hand. But this is using ink and wash. So this is with the Sailor Fude de Manin fountain pen and watercolor on top. So just some buildings that I really liked in Albi that I'd taken photos of, that I've then drawn for my photos to add in over here. Road sign as well, just very fun. Not the quickest, but it was very mindful to do, and I did want to try and capture them, so I like how that looks. And this is a little bit of a filler page with some collage, just from scraps of things that I picked up, so ephemera from a leaflet, and this was also from the brocante, so I picked up a few different, well, it's like this one, where I picked up some envelopes and some little bits and pieces from the brocante and the flea market, so I can do another drawing down here or add in some more journaling. And then this one, so I set myself a 20-minute timer and painted this with acrylic markers again, some Tombow brush pens, and then the Sailor Fude de Manin pen, but with brown ink this time, so I've got that in my 40-degree one. And considering how quick this was, I really, really like it. I think there's more I could add, but because I was on a time limit, it keeps that energy and that freshness. So this is probably my second favourite because, I don't know, it just feels very light and fresh. And this is Chateau de Belbez. I have no idea how to pronounce that, but we visited this one on our way home from Albi because they had a pottery market on. That happens annually, I think. So because we were in the area, it felt like it was meant to be. And there was this gorgeous chateau there with turrets and felt very fairy tale-y. So I took a snap and obviously have drawn that when I've come home and simplified it a lot, but it captures what I wanted it to. So 20 minutes for this one with the line work on top. And yeah, really like that one. Okay, and then we have this one which I painted again when we got back, just of all my wonderful artists who joined me. And I added on this like gingham effect, which didn't work out because I was quite thick with it. It didn't give the gingham effect I wanted, but still fun to play with pattern, and I've really simplified these faces. The people were so special and such an important part of the retreat and the connection that I felt, so I really wanted to include them in here. I've got this blank spread before the final one where I was doing like some swatches. I generally come to the back of my book when I am swatching or sharing a demo, so these things were done as quick little one-to-one demos when I was teaching some of the students whilst there. So yeah, basically I've got one spread left, but I might leave it as is, or I'll stick in some more ephemera because I definitely have plenty. But that's it. That is the full sketchbook from my time in France, and I'm very proud of it. I'm really, really pleased that I was able to fill it within that time frame. So a month and a half, which, like I said at the beginning, is the fastest I've ever filled a sketchbook. It is 60 pages, but it's still full of memories, full of a really lovely trip that I'm going to remember forever. I absolutely adore teaching, and especially in person on these retreats. It's such a special week that I've tried to sum up in that video I've shared that I linked earlier in the cards, but it really is incredible and very, very heartwarming. And I'm just so happy that I have this book now to remember my time from, and just so that I can look through and see all of the things and all the memories from my time in the south of France. So like I mentioned, I am teaching again in France next year, but in the stunning Loire Valley, so a different location, but still with Uptrek because I loved working with them. So there are a few spots left. As I'm filming this, there are 5 spots left on my 2027 art retreat, so I'll leave all the information and the link down below. I'd love to know if you have a favourite spread from this sketchbook, or if there's a technique that you're going to try, or hopefully this has inspired you to grab your sketchbook and start painting. That's what I always love hearing in the comments, that I've inspired you. So do let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I'll chat to you there. Thank you so much for watching. A huge, huge thank you to my patrons as well. Without their support, I wouldn't be able to create these free videos here on YouTube. And thank you for watching too. I hope you have a creative week ahead, and I will see you next Sunday in my new YouTube video. See you later.